Welcome to my session at Adobe Developers Live. My name is Hannes Hertach and I'm a software engineer, and I'll be running this session titled Hands-on Creating a Site with the New JavaScript Blocks. I'm currently a project lead in the AEM VIP program, building sites with the newest AEM features together with our customers. And I'll talk a little bit more about this AEM VIP program at the end of the session, if that's something you're interested in. This session will be mostly hands-on, so by the end, you'll be ready to build a site using AEM's new document-based editing and JavaScript block features. You'll learn to build sites that are really fast and how to build them quickly. So I'm super excited to show you the newest AEM features in this session, and let's dive right in. Before we get started with building though, let's take a look at these new features in AEM that I've been talking about. So AEM has introduced new authoring and development capabilities. It lets you use the tools that you already know, like Word and JavaScript, to develop sites that perform better and that let authors create content at a faster pace. First, let's take a look at the get an overview of the architecture of AEM's new composability. So on the bottom layer, you can see different ways of authoring content, and AEM lets you compose these different ways of authoring content in kind of this new architecture. So one way of authoring is kind of through the classic AEM authoring, as you know and love, but it also lets you integrate with headless systems. And in particular, what I'd like to talk about here is the new document-based authoring, which you can see kind of on the right-hand side, that lets you pull in content from existing sources like Word or Google Drive. So this slide is quite a bit more dense than what we need to understand for this session. So let's take a look at a more simplified view of how a document-based authoring can work. So you can see here on the left, we've got the document authoring. This is where you create your content in tools like Google Drive or SharePoint using Word and Excel. On the right-hand side, we have your code repositories, which is mostly JavaScript code living on GitHub. And Adobe's infrastructure takes care of delivering the content and the code to the browser, where it gets combined to create your experience. So now let's take a quick 2-minute look at how document-based editing looks in kind of the real world. So I've got a page here, a simple blog page. It's kind of a normal technical blog post with some code snippets with some content. And this was created using AEM's document-based editing. So let's open the AEM Sidekick browser extension and click Edit. And you can see that this has opened the same content that we just saw on the website again, but in Google Docs. Here in Google Docs, we can edit the content. So we can, for instance, drag in an image here. And we can write some new content here. So after this has been saved, we can open the Sidekick extension again, click Preview. And you can see that these changes are now reflected on the live site. So you can see how quick and easy it is to develop new experiences and author new content using this document-based authoring system. But it's not only fast to create new content, it's also super performant. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to use Google's PageSpeed Insights. To show that experiences built using the system can be super fast. So first, I'm going to open PageSpeed Insights for the page that you just saw. And you can see that the performance of this site is 100. And we'll get into what this means a little later. But to show that it's not only super simple pages like this, we'll also show that the performance for a much more complex site, which is also using document-based authoring, which is volvotrucks.us, also gets an incredible performance score of 100 using this system. So that was a short 2-minute overview of what document-based editing is. So what will you be learning in this session? You'll learn to go from zero to creating a fully working site by the end of the session. You'll only need pure front-end skills and no domain-specific AEM or Java knowledge to build the site. We'll first cover setting up the project, then we'll cover how you can create content, and last we'll show you how to create custom styles and develop new interactive components in JavaScript for your web page. Everything will be fully detailed like a tutorial, so you might not get everything at first, but that's fine. You can follow along with the recording, which will be available soon later to build a site on your own. So first, let's take a look at the steps to setting up a new project using document-based authoring. There are 3 steps to setting up the project. You first need to set up your code, which means just creating a new GitHub repository from a template that we provide. You'll need to set up your content. So that means creating content in your tool of choice. In this case, we'll be using Google Drive. And you'll need to integrate the two by installing the AEM Sidekick. So that means this is how you publish the content out of Google Docs and onto your actual website. So to find detailed instructions of how to do this, you can scan this QR code to be taken to the tutorials. And actually, for this demo, we'll be following along exactly with this tutorial. So let's jump straight into the demo. I'm going to open the tutorial page. And if we scroll down here, we can find a link to the project boilerplate, which I'm going to open. Now to get started, all we need to do is click Use this template and create a new repository. I'm going to give it a name. And we'll click Create Repository from this template. The second thing we need to do is add the what we call the Helix bot. This bot will automatically redeploy the code whenever we make changes in the GitHub repository. So that kind of takes care of all of your deployment in the project. So I've already got this configured. This screen would look slightly different if you hadn't yet. I just need to add it to this new repository that I just created. And click Save. And we can see that that was successful. So that was our first step. That was setting up the code. Next, we'll need to set up some content for this web page to use. So I'm going to go to my Google Drive and create a new folder. I'm going to call this Dev Live Demo. Open it, and I'm going to share this with a user called helix@adobe.com and send that invitation. So this is sharing access to this directory to kind of our integration. We'll create a new document in here, and we'll name this index. I'm going to put some content into this document just to get started with. I'll drag and drop an image. I'm going to put a title here. And I'm going to copy some text. Okay, and that's our content for now. So now that I've created the content, I need to integrate the content and the code together. And the first thing that we need to do in order to do this is open this fstab.yaml file in our GitHub repository that we just created, and we'll edit it. Now I'm going to copy the folder ID, which I can find in the URL right here of Google Drive, and paste it into here. And I'll commit this change directly to the main branch of my code repository. So now that we've told the code where the content lives, we can also set up the Sidekick browser extension, which you saw before. To do this, we're going to open this web link right here. which lets you configure the Sidekick extension. So as you saw before, the Sidekick extension lets you first move from the published website back into the editing mode on Google Drive. And it also lets you go from Google Drive back into the website so you can preview and publish your content that you created. I'm going to copy this URL and give it a name. And click Go. If you're using Chrome, you see a button here to install the Sidekick browser extension. Since I'm using Firefox, I'm just going to drag this button over here into my bookmarks, which will do exactly the same. So now if we've finished setting all that up correctly, we can go into the Google Docs file. We can open the Sidekick that we just created, and we can click Preview. And you can see that this has already created a live website that is available at this URL using the content which I just created in Word. So let's quickly review what we just did. We created a GitHub repository and added the Helix user. Added the Helix bot integration to it, which deploys our code. We created a Google Drive folder and shared it with the helix@adobe.com user to give access to AEM to the Google Drive folder. And we configured the AEM Sidekick, which allows previewing and publishing our pages. Next, I'd like to talk about how we can author content using Word in a little bit more detail. So let's talk about this document-based authoring. So as you've already seen by now, you can edit the content of your website in Google Docs directly. You can edit content like this. You then open the Sidekick browser extension, which gets you this toolbar, and you can click the preview button. This will preview the code directly in the browser at a live URL, which you can also share. When you're happy with these changes that you've just previewed, you can open the Sidekick again, and it will this time have a publish button. From here, you can hit the publish button, and this will publish the content out to be public on your website. So at this point, I should explain the URL structures that you will have in one of these projects. Your preview URLs will always follow the pattern branch --repo --owner. So this is the branch, the repository, and the owner of the GitHub repository. .helix.page. So this is the preview bucket. When you click publish, the URL changes to be exactly the same, but ending in hlx.live. So this is where you would point your CDN config to actually be your production domain. So this would point to your helix.live domain. So I'd also like to talk about how your website will be structured. And actually, the file structure in Google Drive will directly map to your website structure. So if you have a file in Google Drive called index, or in this case, I guess it would be SharePoint with Word, and your domain was example.com, that index page would be served just if a user goes to example.com. If you have a file called about, this page will be served if a user goes to example.com/about. Or if you have a directory in Google Drive called recipes and inside have a file called risotto, that file will be shown at example.com/recipes/risotto. So now I'd like to actually show in practice some of the authoring features that are available in document-based editing. So first, we'll just learn about text. I'm going to go back into this document that I created before and actually show you some of the features. So it's super simple to create, for instance, bold text simply by doing it the way that you're used to in Google Docs, or same with italic text. You can also create headings super easily. So let's go down here and we'll create a a heading 2. And we'll put some more text below that. We'll also add an image. And then we'll preview this again. So you can see that this is translated here. So we've got some bold text, we've got italic text, we've got a heading, and we've got an image. And this is what we call default content. This is because we didn't have to create any components on the page. We simply were able to edit them as we would normally a Google Docs file. And this was translated onto the page just like we would expect. So the other thing that we can do is also super easily create new pages. So I'm going to create a page here named About. I'll put a title in here and copy some more text again. And you can see that this has created a page at /about on my website. So what about more advanced use cases? You might be saying, well, it's all good to be able to create just text and images on a website, but we need more advanced features on our web pages. So rich components on your page can be inserted through a concept that we call blocks in document-based editing. On the authoring side, so in Google Docs, blocks are just tables in your document. And these tables will always have a first row, which is a heading. And this heading will be the name of the block. So the top row of the table always represents the name of the block or component. And the rest of the table structure depends entirely on the block use case, and this can be fully customized by developer. So on this slide, you see an example of a block called columns, which has 2 columns in it. On one side, we have text, and on the other side, we have an image. And on the website, this will create a column. So that's a super simple way to add more complex components to your page. Some blocks are also created automatically. So because it's not always a great experience to have lots of tables on your page, and this can kind of clutter up the document, you might have realized on the website that we saw before that actually the first image and title kind of became this hero component. So let's quickly take a look at this. You can see that we have the title and the image, and this title actually got overlaid onto the image. So this is a feature that we call auto blocking. There's code to recognize when we have an image followed by a H1 title, and this automatically creates a block called hero with exactly that content inside it. The logic of when these blocks are created automatically can be fully customized by the developer of the website as well. So you can add your own auto blocks to the logic of the website. There are also quite a few default blocks which you can find by opening this link to the documentation. And there's one more special block that I'd like to take a look at here, which is the metadata block. So you can add metadata to the page by adding a block named metadata. And in here, you can set kind of configurations like the title of your page, or also open graph properties like the OG image tag to your website. So let's take another look at the kind of authoring with these more complex features. So let's go back into edit mode on this page. Now, instead of having this image here, we're going to create a new block. So all we do to create a new block is create a new table. And we'll call this block columns. I'm going to split these cells and insert on one side the text, and on the other side, I'll insert an image. Now, when we preview this again, you can see that we now have this columns component on the page where we have the text on one side and the image on the other side. Let's also add a title to this page that is different to the one we have now. So I'll copy and paste this block down here. I'll rename this to metadata. Now on the left side of this block, we're going to have title. And on the right side, we're going to change the title of the page to the new title. We'll preview this again and hard reload to clear the page cache. And you can see that the title of this tab changed to new title. So that was the authoring side of things. But how do we develop new custom blocks? That's what we're going to take a look at next. So the first thing for the kind of development perspective I'd like to talk about is the important files that are located in your GitHub repository. So here I've got kind of a subset of the folder structure, which is present in the GitHub repository. And the first directory that you should be aware of is the blocks directory. Here, all of the files for custom blocks, so components that can be added to the page by the authors, live. And the naming convention here is important. So if this naming convention is followed, the correct blocks that an author adds to the page will automatically be detected and the corresponding code will be loaded. So if an author adds a block named columns to the page, that will automatically find the code in the blocks/columns directory and load the columns.js file and the columns.css style sheet. We've also got a directory named styles, and in here we've got a global style sheet, the style.css file. So here you can place any styles which are relevant to your entire page. Styles which are only relevant to kind of one block will be placed in the corresponding blocks directory. We've also got a scripts directory with the scripts.js file in it. And this file is the global entry point into your website. Here is where all of the blocks are detected and all the code is loaded. Finally, we've got the fstab.yaml file. We already saw this during the setup stage of the project. Here you kind of set up the integration between the content and the code. So how do we actually develop blocks? Let's take a look at the entry point into your website. So on the left side, we again have your Google Docs or Word file. What happens when we click preview? This Word file gets translated into what we call a plain HTML file. So it takes the structure of your content, like paragraphs, like images, and translates them into the corresponding HTML tags, like p tags, like image tags, like h1 tags, etc. This then gets served to the browser, along with a script tag, which loads this global scripts/scripts.js file that we talked about on the previous slide. This scripts file will then perform what we call decoration on the plain HTML. So it will load the correct code for all of the blocks which were detected on the page, transform these blocks, and kind of render them the way that you want. So how does this decoration process look like for a block? On this slide, you can see on the left side a block that an author could have added to a page. In this case, it's just called generic block name, and it's got two rows. On the first row, there's just a single column called Hello World, and on the second row, we have two columns. And on the right side of this slide, you can see the kind of DOM structure that this block would get translated to on your web page. So I've kind of added some colors here. You can see that the block name became a div with a class that has the exact same block name as the author put into the header. Then the rest of the table gets translated into divs the way that you would expect. So each row is its own div, and inside of this row div, we have more divs for each column. So now that you have this HTML structure on your page, how does this block JavaScript actually decorate this HTML? So what does this decoration process look like? Well, each of these blocks will export a function named decorate. And as an argument, this receives a reference to the DOM element that represents your block. And this function will be called for each instance of the block on the page. So you can see here that this DOM element will be passed into the function. And inside this function, you're free to really transform the content however you like. So to make this a little bit less abstract, let's take a look at an example. We'd like to have a quote block on our page. So the author can create a block named quote, where they can put a quote and an author. And this will get displayed kind of in a nice way on the page. And it should also be semantically correct. So in HTML, there's a block quote element, and we want the page to use this block quote element. So let's take a look at the development flow. The first thing I'm going to do is clone the repository that I just created. I'm going to go into it. And I'm going to run npm install. I'm going to open this in my editor. And I'm also going to run this command npx helix CLI up. This creates a local proxy kind of to proxy the content to our local machine, but use the code that we have cloned locally. So you can see that by running this command, we can now access the website through localhost 3000. So this is exactly the same content, but using the code which we have locally. And I'm also going to open the code right here. So we want to create this quote block. And the first thing that we're going to do is not actually code anything, but we'll add the content of this quote block to the page. So I'm going to copy this block and place it up here. And we're going to name this quote. So this is the kind of content for the block that we need. In here, I'm going to put the actual quote. And I'll insert another row. I'm going to preview this content to push it to the website. So you can see that this has added the content that I just added to the page, but it doesn't look very spectacular. So if we inspect this, we can see that it's just divs. So now we'll get into the process of decorating these divs to look the way that we would like them to look. And what's super cool is that if you reload your localhost instance, the new content will be immediately available. So you don't need to do any syncing of content between remote and local instances. So to create this block, how are we going to do this? The first step that we need to do is create the corresponding file. So we'll go in here and we'll create a new directory named quote. We'll create a new file named quote.js and a new file named quote.css. And you can see that there's still not been any effect to the page, of course. Now, in the JavaScript file, we're going to export a function named decorate. And we're going to pass this block parameter into here. So this will be the DOM element which is on the page. Now, inside of this code, we're going to do kind of 2 steps. And I'm going to add these as a comment. So first, we're going to decorate the quote as a block quote element, meaning we're going to take the div that's currently on the page and transform it into a semantically correct HTML block quote element. And then we'll decorate the author. So we'll do just some style transformations on the tag representing the author. I'm going to add the div representing the quote. So this is I'm kind of extracting the content of the quote, and I'm creating a new element called the block quote. And I'm going to set the inner HTML of this block quote element to be the quote. And then I'll replace the current div with the block quote. For the author, I'm just going to copy paste the code over. This does something very similar. It's going to extract the div where the author name is currently. It's going to create a new paragraph. It's going to set the content of the paragraph to be the author, and it's going to replace the div with this new paragraph. So if we go back to the page, we can see that this has already transformed the content to be semantically correct. So we can see that here we now have a block quote HTML element, and it's been wrapped in quotes like we did right here in the code. We wrapped the content of the quote in kind of quotes. Now, just for completeness here, I'm going to copy some CSS that I wrote earlier and paste this into the quote.css file to show how easy it is to style. So if we go back onto the page, we can instantly see that our block has been styled. So that's great. We've got this change locally, but how do we publish this change to be publicly available on our website? For this, I'm going to create a new branch. I'm going to create a new commit. And I'm going to push this. So by pushing this to the live website, if we preview this, we can see that this opens the kind of main URL here. And on the main URL, this change is still not reflected. We can only see the content, but not the code change yet. But since we just created a branch named quote, we can copy the branch name and paste it here instead of main. So if we remember, the URL structure was branch repo owner. So we replaced the branch in the URL structure. And if we reload, we can see that the code change is now reflected on this preview URL. So this is already a public URL that you can share with anyone to get feedback on your changes. So now when you're happy with these changes and want to get them into production on your website, we're going to create a new pull request. And what's super cool about the pull request is that they're also going to analyze the performance of your page. So we need to paste the URL of our change into the pull request. And click Create Pull Request. So this is going to take a few seconds, but it's going to run a performance speed test on the website to ensure that by merging this pull request, we are not going to create any performance issues on the page. And this is just going to take a few moments. And we can see that the performance here is looking great. So after we're happy with the performance, we can also click on this link to preview again. So this is what we already saw. We can go back and we can merge this pull request. Now, after merging, if we preview the page again, we can see that the change is also reflected on the URL now using main. So that's how simple it is to develop new interactive blocks as well on your page. So you're now able to develop a site from scratch using document-based editing. You've seen how you can set up the page, you've seen how you can author content, and you've seen how you can develop new blocks for your page. If you're interested in this feature, you can try it out at the links that I included in the slides, or there will also be a link on the next page. And if you're interested in using this feature in your company, you can reach out to your Adobe representative today about the AEM VIP program. So we now have some time for Q&A if there are any questions, and you can scan this QR code to continue the conversation even after this session ends on Experience League.
All right. Thank you so much, Hannes. That was fantastic. I know a bazillion more things about building with JavaScript blocks from scratch. We do not have any questions yet, so we'll give it a minute here. You know, and it's great the things that you learn when you watch people present. I had no idea you were a musician, man. We're not on video and meetings often enough.
Yeah, it's a good background, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, you definitely that was good. Even with the kind of false start at the beginning, it definitely fit right into the time period that we had. So all good.
Exactly. And I think it was quite dense content, so I understand if there's no questions, because it's a lot. But I think the recording will be available, and I'd recommend anyone follow along with this and build their own site just to experience themselves how easy it can be.
Right on. That's fantastic. Yeah, and as you mentioned, continue the conversation on Experience League. You can anyone watching can follow this, and yeah, go for it. All right. Well, without delaying anymore, let's close out the session. And thank you, Hannes. And we'll.
Yeah, thank you, Ron, for the opportunity to present this.
Yeah, fantastic. We'll catch you later.
Bye-bye.